Good to see everyone, and really glad you could join us. This conversation is going to require that you come off of mute, so just know that, and we'll actually just going to start right now. So before I introduce this, I just want to ask real quickly. So this is just like a word or a phrase. Um, what prompted you to join this call? What prompted you to join this call? Just come off mute and shout it out.
um, Building and strengthening nonprofit ecosystems.
Okay, great.
You,
I'm sorry.
you.
Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Randy. Uh, how about others?
Connection.
Connection? All right.
Could
Oh,
totally relate to this topic
You could, why is that, Wendy?
because it's a challenge
It's a challenge,
that I
right?
think that we're all dealing with.
All right.
I would
Other,
agree with her. Also, we have a lot of nonprofits that are siloed, so having them work together.
Dan, tell us where you're from.
I'm from Fort Wayne,
Great.
Indiana.
All right. Good to see you. How about others?
I'm
We're
here. Oh,
Go ahead, Beth.
okay. Hi, everybody.
Hey.
I'm Beth. I'm here because I truly believe in philanthropy's role as a holder and hoster and a convener. And over the past several years, I've really seen the power of when we hold space differently and allow others to come and be in that space, magic can happen. And so I was intrigued by the title and funder only to hear what others are doing too.
All right. Well, given your response, Beth, you are now leading this webinar.
Okay. I
Okay.
got it. I got it, Rich. We're good.
How about others? Why decide to join the call?
just wondering if there's something that we may need to change in our approach or thinking when we consider asking nonprofits to work together. Like, how well are we working together?
Mhm.
What might we not know or see?
Great. Thanks, Brennan. Okay. So I promised that by 2 o'clock Eastern time, we will be done because I know everyone has other commitments. So don't worry about the time as we start to approach the top of the hour because we will be sure to be done at 2 o'clock Eastern time. Let me tell you why we decided to do this because as we've been talking to a lot of funders across the country, as we're working in many of your communities with you, we keep hearing that we're in a tough environment. Funding is becoming increasingly difficult to come by. I just read an article literally right before getting on this call that was um, reporting that federal grants to nonprofits have declined 38% over the last year alone. That's quite a dramatic drop. Um, and we know all these things are happening, drops in grants, cuts in things like Obamacare, and other things. So all these cuts are occurring while needs are increasing. And so there's real pressure um, on the funding sector, on the philanthropic sector, um, and on nonprofits and others who do this work. We also know that, as some of you suggested, it can be a challenge to get different groups to work together, particularly in this kind of environment, which we'll come back to and talk about in a moment. Uh, at the same time, I was just on a call this morning with a funder, where the funder kept, it's no one on this call, by the way, where the funder, but this will maybe sound familiar to you, where their funder kept throwing around the word collaboration, which to me is kind of like a $5 word. It's like, and also like we talk about collaboration a lot, but I often wonder what it means in reality. And so today, one of the distinctions I'm going to make is the difference between groups getting together versus working together. Getting together versus working together. So if you can keep that sort of phrase in your mind, getting together versus working together. I think we're real good at getting together, particularly getting nonprofits together. I'm not so sure, in fact, I'm convinced we're not as good at helping folks work together, right? To actually work together. So you still with me? Great. All right. So um, many of us have worked together before, and you know the Institute loves to create two lists that are juxtaposed to one another because it's a quick way to identify things and engage in a conversation, and it requires us to generate those lists together. So again, you'll have to come off mute for us to do this. So the first list I want to create is from your perspective, what are nonprofits experiencing these days? What are nonprofits experiencing these days?
Uncertainty.
Uncertainty,
I say stress.
stress. Was that Dina?
Yeah, yeah.
Stress in terms of,
Well, just again, I think it links back to that uncertainty, just never knowing and just, you never know when the other shoe's going to drop and, things like that. So there's always like this anxiety that's kind of lingering.
okay, others?
An increase in demand for their services, and you alluded to that earlier
Hmm.
already. So a huge demand, um, an increase for what they're doing, but
Hmm.
their funding is being cut tremendously.
Okay, others?
I would say a loss of staff, whether staff are moving on to other opportunities or
Mm,
they're losing staff because they have to cut them.
okay,
Boards that aren't really leading.
meaning what, Wendy?
They are micromanaging and not providing that visionary oversight that the organization really needs.
Okay,
I think a lot of creativity. They have to be very incredibly creative right now.
okay.
Wendy, I want to add to what you said, boards not taking responsibility. You're saying, they want to micromanage, they're stepping in and trying to do too much. I think we also have boards that become overwhelmed or don't engage, and so the staff's left to figure it all out.
Hmm. Others?
I
Where do you
think
see
they're
them experiencing?
experiencing, chronic, long-standing time and conditions that are draining of creativity, draining of curiosity, draining of flexibility.
Uh, what was the first part of that, Beth?
I think they've been operating and living in conditions chronically for, 6+ years or
Mm,
more, in conditions that drain creativity, innovation, flexibility, curiosity, all the things we know that they're so good at, right? When they're
okay.
fresh and resourced.
Yeah, so it's interesting because we often believe that, or want to believe that COVID ended and all the ill effects of that. But actually, as COVID ended and we breathed a sigh of relief and looked up, we realized that actually inequities and disparities and challenges were growing. So in a sense, this is a continuation,
Oh, very
right?
much so.
Yeah. So thanks for raising that. Others?
And maybe environmental instability, just nationally, obviously, but locally, we've had some things like this is going to change. It's going to have a huge impact on you. Oh, no, wait, it's not going to change, but it
Mm,
might still, but not right now, but maybe later. If it's making it extremely hard to plan and to
mm,
Beth's point, especially to innovate or take a risk, because there just is not a lot of faith that things aren't going to change maybe in unpredictable ways or without warning.
right. Thanks, Jennifer.
I've seen some nonprofits become very focused,
Mm,
out of a negative situation, usually funding or capacity, but they become focused. They actually get a lot better at less things.
mhm. So you see that as a potential positive.
If for nonprofits that have been able to get past, like you do have to let some things go,
Yeah.
and sometimes that's not possible. Like people legitimately need what you have to provide. But for the organizations that have been able to kind of focus on less, they've been
Mm,
able to do those things really well.
okay. Anyone else on this? Your sense of where nonprofits are, what they're experiencing.
I think we're seeing a lot of resilience, but I'm
Hmm.
not sure that's a positive thing because they're having to be that way based on the circumstances they're dealing with every day. And sometimes, while resiliency could be a really great thing to experience, it can also be born out of crisis. And I think that's
Right.
more the latter than the great.
Right. So in that sense, John, you're suggesting that there could be a difference between being resilient and thriving. Okay. Something to keep in mind as we keep moving through this. Other thoughts on this? So they're under stress, increased demand, constrained funding, loss of stability, living in chronic conditions. So how would you characterize the mindset of someone in that working in those conditions?
Stress, burned out.
Burnt out. Okay. What else?
Survival mode.
Survival.
Traumatized.
I'll be back like
Traumatized. Okay.
4:30.
I'm sorry.
I think we're mountain biking. And I told Will if he goes,
Hey, Lauren, you're on
oops, sorry.
mute. All right. All right. Survival mode, traumatized. What else?
Limited.
I'm sorry.
Limited. They're
Limited.
limited. They're so focused on funding search that they can't be proactive in their mission.
Okay. Anything else?
I was going to say, I also think what we're seeing too is I feel like we've kind of the pendulum swinging back on the competitiveness of nonprofits.
Mhm.
So, everybody's fighting for that, dollar. And again, it's become kind of like, I don't know, it's just like I said, it's very competitive right now and it's kind of gets a little ugly sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other words or phrases you'd use to characterize, given the overall list we came up with? All right. So survival mode, traumatized, fighting for what's left. All these things produce in the Institute's work a sense of inwardness, right? You're hunkering down. So when you're in that environment, just think of yourself now, when well, actually, let me ask it this way. For yourself, when you're in survival mode, when you feel like you're fighting for what's left over, when you're hunkered down, what's the physical sensation you have in your body? The physical in your body for you.
A heaviness.
Heaviness. Okay. And where do you feel it?
Like in my chest.
Okay. How about others? Thanks, Amber.
My head hurts.
Your head hurts? Okay.
My
Like,
body aches.
Your body aches. Where?
My joints feel physical pain when I'm under extreme stress.
Okay. Ashley?
I was gonna say my shoulders. It feels like I'm always just never relaxing.
Okay.
I'm an anxiety in the tummy person.
Okay.
Yeah. Stomach for me.
Stomach. Okay.
Clenching
All
my
right.
jaw.
I'm sorry, in your jaw?
Clenching my jaw.
Clenching your jaw. Okay. So you can, it's a physical sensation, right? It's what would be called a somatic experience. So when you're having those physical responses to stress, to fighting for what's left over, for particularly when it gets either acute or when it especially becomes chronic, how open are you to change? Are you open? How open are you to hear that you need to change something you're doing? How open are you to take a risk to work with other people you may not know exceedingly well, where there may not be a lot of trust already?
I'm very receptive, and my approach is always to come in more like listening, like willing to listen
All
and
right.
hear all kinds of different diverse voices. I'm
Even when
very receptive.
even when you're under intense stress?
Yes, it's necessary.
Well, good.
It's not easy.
Right. All right.
I think you may feel more vulnerable.
I'm sorry?
I think you may feel more vulnerable.
Which does what?
Makes you less willing to go outside of your shell.
Okay. So for some of us do well under these conditions, maybe because we have a lot of practice, maybe because we have a lot of confidence, maybe because we've had good experiences. There could be any number of reasons. Maybe because of the way you were raised, right? Some of this can go back to childhood. But for a lot of people, when they're hunkered down, when they're under stress, when they feel traumatized, to use someone's term, when they feel like they have to fight for what's left over, it can be very difficult to be open to new ideas, to work in different ways, to consider different options. To Barbara's point, to make oneself vulnerable, particularly when you feel potentially compromised. You with me? I just need you to get this clearly in your frame of mind. I actually need you to keep feeling it in your body, the somatic experience, because that's what we're dealing with, right? We can't get folks to move forward together, to work together, if we're not meeting them where they are. It's not possible. So I just need you to get this fixed in your mind for a moment. Now, I want to shift gears and create a second list. And it's going to require you to be honest and vulnerable. Because I'm going to ask you to think about how, not how you've operated in the best of circumstances, but what a normal or typical reflex might be, either for yourself or among funders. You with me? This is important. So don't give me the outlying experience. We'll get to those. Give me the typical experience that a nonprofit might experience. So when we say we want to get quote unquote get nonprofits to work together, what do we usually say or do in relationship to nonprofits to get them to work together?
Tell them they'll only get funding if they promise to work.
Great, thanks, Josh.
Invite them all to a meeting with no agenda.
Okay. Thanks, Amber.
Us giving them the advice on what they should be doing.
Okay, thanks, Randy. What else?
We convene agency executive quarterly meetings.
Okay.
Ask them to work together as though that will somehow lighten the load. And yet it will actually in reality add to it.
Why is that?
Because true collaboration takes time, effort, energy, and thinking differently and showing up differently and being willing to sort of move beyond the things that you can go to your comfort zone in.
Mm-hmm.
So
great,
yeah.
Thanks, Glenn.
Mm-hmm.
Also, sometimes collaboration, at least in the early stages, does not result in cost savings, but we're not always offering dollars with our recommendation or wholehearted support for their collaboration.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Okay. And sometimes there's actual grant cycles created around joint proposals and collaborative proposals that, there's a lot of sides to that coin as well.
Okay. And what's wrong with that, John?
Inherently nothing. If there's a planning grant that supports the time and effort required to, come to an idea, let alone the time it takes to then execute that idea, assuming that idea meets the needs of the community it's trying to serve.
Okay,
But
so it goes on
inherently
Jennifer.
nothing. There's a lot of layers that go into that, both from a creative standpoint on the funder side and from a actual collaborative partnership side on the grantee side.
Great. Thanks, John.
I was just going to say that I think sometimes we have this assumption that the nonprofits aren't working together.
Mm,
But in actuality, they really are. You know what I mean? And it might not just be so, structured as we kind of think that they
mm,
should be, but they are. And I feel like, we say, oh, they should, be more efficient. I think are running efficiently. I don't think we give them enough credit for that.
mm. That's uh, great. I'll come back to that in a second, Dina. Thanks.
When I think about the question, Rich, I think I want to replace the word work with come together. So what does GCF do to get them to nonprofits to come together to the same place or rooms? We pay for their round trip mileage. We feed them like really, really good food. We
Mhm.
love on them in different ways, like bringing in speakers and giving them resources that they might not spend on themselves or on
Right.
their nonprofit.
Okay, great. So that's a positive experience. That's great. So if you're in survival mode, you're hunkered down, you're fighting over potentially limited resources, and someone comes and tells you, come to a meeting, there's no agenda, tell them you have to collaborate. Um, we're uh, we're going to tell you what to do. What's the effects of that?
You feel like you're not going to be getting the support no matter I'm putting myself in that nonprofit's view that there's not enough money and that we all got to start working together, which means less funds available, even more so than what already is. That would
Mhm.
be the feeling I would get.
Right.
I think some may try to make it work because of who we are and the funding that we provide them already. So they're like, yeah, sure, we'll do it. We'll figure it out.
And what's the effect of that?
That it's kind of like half-hearted and it really may end up not being meaningful, but just because we said they should do it.
Right.
Might feel extractive to add on that, but Ashley's.
Okay. How's this approach working? How well is it working? Seems like it would work really well. They're under stress, they're in survival mode, they have chronic challenges, and we say, hey, you got to work better together. Hey, come to another meeting and we're not going to have an agenda or produce anything, but hopefully it'll produce good results. How's that working for us?
It creates more of what we're trying to heal. I think they become more siloed,
Mhm.
more fearful. They surround, the wagons even more to say, well, I'm going to be the one left standing, um, rather than I'm going to come together because they don't want to be forced to do anything and often look at us like, well, what do we really know about the problem anyway? Because
Mhm.
they're the experts.
Anyone else?
I think it's also the sort of almost like the, if you can say at the conference attitude where you go to the conference, but then you go back and you close up your book, put it on the shelf because I got all these other things I got to deal with today.
Mhm. All right. Anyone else? So I think you know that the reason why I wanted to create these two lists is if we can't name where people are starting from, and we can't name some of the things we might be doing in response to that, then it's very difficult to figure out a better way forward. And too often, to Randy's point, I think we go to conferences, we jump to solutions, but because the solutions are not really contextualized in terms of what is currently happening, the conditions we're working in, they just seem like another set of solutions when in fact, I think we need to be in response to something and for something, right? In order to be effective. Um, and that's why I wanted to go through these two lists. It may vary a little in your community or your context. I understand that. It's not a one size fits all, but I suspect somewhere on that first list, there are experiences that you've had in your community or that you're having. And I suspect somewhere on that second list, there's some combination of factors that reflect the thrust of what might be the response in your community to get nonprofits to work together and other groups. Does that ring true? So if that rings true, we just have to hold, and I want you to hold the somatic, the physical sensation that you had on the first list, because that's the big tell about how people, the mindset and the sensation they're coming into the discussion with. Like, don't think about this too analytically. The physical sensation, the somatic feeling is what you need to remember, because that's the thing you're going to be able to identify with fastest, the most, and it's going to be, it's going to resonate with you because you've been in those situations yourself, right? So if someone's on lockdown and you're trying to get them to work together and you're not releasing some positive energy, some positive thrust forward, some alternative to being on lockdown, we're not going anywhere. It's impossible. It's not impossible. It's not likely, maybe a better way to say it. And we want to increase the likelihood that people will step forward and want to move forward together for positive reasons, right? So this context is, if we just ended here, I would say it's fine because you just need this context in your mind. But I don't want to end here, in part because we have another 2 hours of this session left. So we've got 30 minutes left. So we're right on time. So let's, before I do what I was planning to do, I just want to create one more list together really quickly. Some of you have already mentioned things that would go on this list, so feel free to repeat them now. And I want you to think about this in terms of conditions, not tactics. Conditions, right? Because conditions are the most transferable thing. Tactics aren't always transferable. So what conditions, in order to help people move out of that first list into a different space, what conditions do we need to create for them? And don't try to think about perfection here. Just shout out anything that comes to mind. It doesn't have to be perfectly formed.
A space of grace.
Basic.
Space of grace to allow them to openly talk and explain what's going on.
Okay, great. Thanks.
No judgment.
Okay.
Lessen the burdens,
I'm sorry.
lessen their burdens in reporting, etc.
Okay, great. Thanks, Nan. What else? Or Barbara?
Shifting the power dynamics.
Okay. Meaning what?
Meaning that having a good understanding that they're the experts doing the work and on the ground, and they're the ones that we rely on to inform us of what's happening in the communities.
Great. Perfect. Thank you. That's really helpful. What else?
A foundation of trust has to exist
And how does that get created?
with investment of time. I mean, it's not usually built overnight, but it combines what everybody is saying when you come at it honestly and knowing that you're not the expert that they are, then you can build up that trust. But if the trust isn't there, you're not going to get anywhere with it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Wendy. What else?
Safety and reassurance, because I think when we approach them sometimes, because they're in that mindset, they automatically think that they are failing.
Okay.
That we're there to change them because they're not doing enough. They're not doing their job. They're not solving the problem.
Great. Thanks, Paula. Other things, other conditions? Yeah, John.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to phrase it as condition, but showing up. like being responsive, like if they email or they call or they invite you to coffee or creating, and by doing so, creating that trust, creating that relationship, creating that space for a real conversation to exist. And then, replicating rooms like this where people can be vulnerable, they can share what's on their mind, what conditions they're facing. Like, I think that's really important now, even more so than it has been in the past.
Right. Great. Suzanne, were you going to jump in? Suzanne Minnick? No? Okay. Others? Conditions?
I think creating an open dialogue and maintaining the channels of communication open. And the way that we do that is trying to build that trust, which it doesn't happen overnight, like Wendy mentioned, but it happens by us showing up consistently over time. But I
Okay.
think that open dialogue is very important.
Great. Perfect. Thank you. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. Others? All right. So, open dialogue, having real conversations, some kind of safety, building a foundation of trust, seeing people who you've brought together as the experts, um, having a space of grace to openly talk. So a lot of these things deal with how do we open things up as opposed to close them down? And how do we do it in a constructive, productive way, right? There are ways to open things up. Thanks, Brian. Right. In a way that creates abundance or might be thought of as generative. I think of it as generative, right? There's a lot of spaces that we create that are not generative. They're flat. Someone used the word extract. Beth used the word extract before. They kind of feel extractive. They're like they're pulling from you to something else as opposed to being with you and for you. There's a lot of spaces that are simply a waste of time. They don't produce anything that enable us to move forward. So I think of all these spaces as what will allow us to talk openly, that will create a sense of possibility, that will propel us forward, that enable us to move where we need each other. Everyone with me? That's those are sort of things that I think of in these spaces. So part of today is to remind, for those of you who have worked with the Institute, I want to remind you of things you already know. I don't want to give you new things. I don't want to give you new things. For those of you who haven't worked with the Institute, these will be new things, but they're easily accessible because we can provide them to you for free. Like you can get them. And you don't need special training to necessarily use them, though it might help. So when we created the two lists to get you with me, so I'm going to give you 3 or 4 things. When we created the 2 lists, what are nonprofits experiencing? What do we typically do? What was the benefit of that for you overall, generically? What was the benefit of that for you? Don't overthink this.
A reminder that they're people and we're people too. We're all in the same boat.
Great. So a reminder. Thanks, Nan. What else?
That our experiences aren't anomalies, that this is happening throughout.
Okay, great. What else?
Empathy.
Empathy? Great. Anything else? Did it help you see? Did it help you gain clarity? No? Yes? Okay. All right. So the first thing I want to suggest that you can do if you want to get people to work together, not just get together. I'm using get together in a pejorative sense. Like we're just going to get together and do a dog and pony show. We're just going to get together and quote unquote share endlessly, not leading anywhere. We're going to get together and have lunch together, but nothing ever really gets discussed. All right. So those are all things that are useful, but they don't lead to working together necessarily, producing things. I'm interested in how can we get folks in a space where they can produce things and they feel like they have some greater sense of control over what's happening, right? All right, so two lists I'm going to start with two lists that you can create that most of you have been through with us. Okay, you ready? The first list is, what does it mean when we're turned inward? Get people to list things. So actually, this gets your point about it's not an anomaly. We've all experienced these things, right? What does it mean when you're turned inward? You generate that together. So it's generative. You're in it together. You're seeing it's not you alone. You're not isolating yourself. You're with other people who are saying things that are like what you're saying, which gives people comfort that I'm not screwed. I'm not in this by myself. I'm not doing something intrinsically wrong. We're all kind of doing this, right? So what does it mean to be turned inward? And then ask people, what effects does this have on how we operate and how we work together, right? We just did this in Richmond yesterday. Then, you know where I'm going, a second list, and you just get people to list it, right? Words or phrases. They don't need to give you paragraphs. What does it mean to be when we're turned outward? And people are going to mention all the things that you mentioned. Bronwyn, to your point, people tend to talk about abundance as opposed to scarcity, right? The first list produces scarcity. The second list produces abundance. The first list often generates we take credit or want credit because we think we need credit. The second list says we share credit, right? You know, you've been through this. But when people see this list, it immediately makes them feel less vulnerable because they were vulnerable in creating the list and they realize we're in it together. They realize that we share something together and it points them in a direction. You're not fully there yet, but it gives people a touchstone for actually what they need to do to work together, right? All the conditions for working together typically get created by the turned outward list. I don't know when, if you're in Amber, if you remember this, when we did this in North River just a couple of weeks ago, people came up with pretty strong lists. So that's my first thing. Takes 20 minutes. It's a great way to open a meeting. People actually want to work on the turned outward list because they know that's their path forward. So that's about the easiest, fastest, simplest way to get this conversation moving in a different direction. Now, notice you didn't tell them what to do. You didn't tell them how they have to behave. You didn't tell them that their money is connected to this. You didn't make a grant contingent on this. They generated, as someone said, they were the experts in the room. They generated this. They're going to own it because it's theirs. It's not yours. So what becomes important is you don't try to take ownership of this list. It's their collective list. And what I would say is you want to get this list typed up and you want to send it back. So someone said you got to keep showing up. One way to show up is to provide this list back to people so that they know that you heard them and that you're creating a track record of consistent engagement. That's really pivotal here. All right, any quick questions about that?
Rich, I have a question. How important is it if there are funders in the room to participate fully in that, like, and have it be authentic and then have that voice also included in the outward next steps? Like, can you give ideas about how when that fails or what to be cautious of? I don't know the best way to phrase the question.
So we've got a bunch of funders on this call who have done it. So I see Tracy. She's done it numerous times because we've done so many labs and other things in Alamance County. So Tracy, you participate in these conversations. What do you need to do as a funder in that space? How do you need to engage?
So, I mean, I don't know if this is the right answer, but the way that we've approached everything from our work in community, and we have these conversations quite a bit, but we try to take everything from a relationship building standpoint. So we fully participate anytime that we're asking these questions. So if we're bringing folks around the table, I mean, we take a little bit more of a back seat. We don't want it to just be our voice, but we want folks to know that we experience a lot of the same things that they do, even though they may not realize that. So it helps them to see that the relationship is reciprocal. So we participate.
Yeah, that's great. There you go. So I would say follow Tracy's advice.
I have a question regarding the inward and outward list. I guess I need a little bit of clarity because when I heard the word inward, it made me think of like I'm gonna shut down because I'm like getting it within me. So I guess I need a little bit of clarity around that inward versus outward.
Yeah. So when I say, what happens when you turn inward? What would you say? Just try it out.
For me, I'm like, I'm gonna shut down because I'm looking inward.
There you go. That's
Okay.
a response that someone might give. You're right on track. All right. I just want to point out a thing you just made me think about something else. There's a difference between inwardness and self-reflection, right? Self-reflection is very important. Self-awareness is critical to this whole process. So we're not talking about self-reflection, we're talking about inwardness. So sometimes that comes up. All right, so I want to give you another thing, another tool, practical thing you can do in this space. Many of you know this already, so this is a reminder. Others, this may be new. So we have something called the aspirations exercise, right? 3 questions, 3 basic questions. What are your aspirations for the community? What are the challenges in reaching those aspirations? What are the conditions we need to change in order to reach our aspirations? The beauty of this is A, it's 3 questions. B, you can do it in 40 minutes. C, the same effects. When people generate answers to these questions, it's helping them to see what are their aspirations for moving forward, as opposed to what are all the problems we're mired in? Why can't we work together better? Please don't ever start. That's not a good question to start with. It locks people in, right? We're trying to free people up and unlock their potential, which they have. We're not giving them potential. We're helping them unlock their own potential and their shared potential. So when we ask people, what are your aspirations? They're articulating basically what they're seeking to create. And then we say, what are the conditions what are the challenges? They're going to start to say, well, we're too turf conscious. We don't work well enough together. We're fighting for funding, whatever it might be. So they're naming it themselves. You're not naming it for them. There's nothing more powerful in life than naming something for yourself. It's a precondition to change, right? You can't change if you haven't named it. So the 3 questions are, what are your aspirations for your community? What are the challenges in reaching the aspirations? This is on our website, by the way. And what are the conditions that need to change to reach our aspirations? So the conditions, they're going to start to talk about, we need to build more trust. We need to work better together. We need stronger relationships, all things that you have already mentioned. So it creates the foundation to talk about, okay, so what do we need to do in order to move forward in this way? So now they're actually creating the roadmap forward. You don't have to do it for them. And what we have found is if we're trying to get people to work together, this is the fastest turn outward, turn inward. And then the aspirations exercise, if we're going to do them together, we flip them. Aspirations exercise, then turn inward, turn outward. It's the fastest way to get people moving and to feel like they have some greater semblance of control to shape their future. And remember, everyone feels out of control today. Things are chaotic and confusing. So, and this is safe because they're generating it together. So they're in it together. But you didn't tell them that, they created that. And there's a big difference on that. Everyone still with me? So what we sort of alluded to this earlier. I think, Josh, you started us with this. When I asked you, what do we normally do? We tell them they have to work together. And then we attach funding to it. And then we do also, this is a way to do it without getting into all that and without further locking people up, locking them down. Right? All right, third thing. Many of you have used our community conversations or asked questions or other things. Over time, right? So far I've talked about what helps unlock it. Then the question becomes, how do we get people to work together over time? And Ashley, you'll remember in Reading, the after-school team, they already had a ton of programs. The question was, could they align them better to what mattered to the community? Could they create a more seamless set of supports for the community? Could they locate those supports in places where people really needed them and wanted them? Meaning, could they change and work together differently moving forward than having this fragmented system that wasn't always focused on what people really needed? What prompted that was they learned from the community what people really needed and wanted. What we call public knowledge. And the reason why this public knowledge, and in Alamance, we had the arts team. They were highly fragmented. They wanted to use arts to help build a stronger community. But what enabled them to deal with their fragmentation and work better together moving forward? When they started to hear from the community what their aspirations were, and people looked at that public knowledge and said, there's no way as an after-school program or as an arts organization that we can do this alone. We actually need to work together. We need each other. And the public knowledge became a reference point outside of their own programs and strategies. Right? We need to create something outside an outside reference point, what psychologists would call a third reference point. Right? So the public knowledge creates that, and it creates a touchstone to keep coming back to over time to make sure that you're actually aligned and focused on this work. So when a lot of people say we can't get folks organized or working together, I'm like, well, you already have the tools to do it. We need to use them with a different lens for what we're trying to solve for. So it's not just getting things moving, it's actually using these tools to help groups to start to work together differently. So I'm curious I'm going to stop here. There's another thing I was going to raise, but I'm not going to. What does this make you think about?
So we are starting to kind of look at shared outcomes. And so we're going to be presenting this to our partners. And so I had a thought that it's so much change that maybe starting with the aspirations exercise may be a good way to ground it. We all want what's best for the community, but once they hear United Way is changing how you have to do your report, they may just shut down and not be receptive.
That's right.
But it's all to make sure that we're supporting what's best for the community.
Right. Right. The question is, can you do it in a contextualized way or an acontextualized way? Yep. Other thoughts about using some of these, one of these, all these, in service of helping? Remember, I just want to keep coming back to where we started. Keep reminding yourselves, people are having the somatic experience. And the more you bring them together to work together, the more you're going to heighten that somatic experience. Right? It becomes heightened, not lessened. So the question becomes, how do we create a safe space that lessens the pressure, that provides an alternative experience, that creates a sense that we're in it together, a sense of possibility, and is generative, that we own? Right? That's the context that we're talking about these tools. That's why they're important, because they actually do those things and they enable people to do those things together without you telling people what to do. and they're likely to come up with better ways forward than what we might come up with on our own.
Where I am with these tools, suggestions, ideas, is just remembering to keep the purpose problem thing
Yeah.
you're trying to solve for like really small, because all this stuff it does not cancel out all those big pressures that we just talked about. It may cancel out some of the little pressures that we have between each other, but there's going to be so much outside of it, of that conversation, that is so
Yeah.
political or what have you, that is just like, okay, if we can agree, that's great. But some things that's not like going to be a revolutionary, transformational, fix everything sort of thing. I know you're not saying it will be,
Yeah.
but it's something that we have to remember.
I'm so glad you said that. So yes, I think that's part of the meta context we're in as a country, and we don't have the power to change it. Yet, if you think about the fact that within that larger context, people don't feel like they have any ability to shape things around them, what this is doing is giving them a sphere of influence that enables them to begin to shape what's around them, which enables them to engender a sense of belief that we actually can create something together. And that's the beginning of a pathway forward. It's not the pathway by itself, but it's the beginning. Otherwise, we're just going to remain hunkered down. So I think you're absolutely right. So don't promise more than what we can deliver on here, but don't undersell the potential for what people can create together. Thanks, Josh. That's really important. Any other thoughts about this?
Rich, it's Paula. You made a comment about there's no way we can do this alone. And people don't arrive at that just because you do the exercise one time. It's a journey for them to come to the realization and the acceptance that they can't do it alone and that that's okay.
Right.
Because many times they've been charged with being responsible for the solution and not really looking outside themselves to think, I really can't do all this by myself. My organization can't, I can't. And really, if I don't do it alone, it's going to be sustainable change.
Right. So the implication for everyone on this call is who's going to convene the space over time that enables people to keep coming back and revisiting this conversation and adding to it over time. So in our work with communities, as many of you know, that structure is our team structure. But what's the mechanism or space in your community in order for people to keep doing this? And what's your role in supporting that space or enabling others to support that space? Right? Because maybe that's not the best space for a funder. Maybe it is. Going back to Suzanne Minnick's question. Thanks, Paul. All right. I promise to get you out of here at the top of the hour. I'm always afraid we're never going to have enough to talk about in these things. And then we do, which is always a nice surprise for me. That's more on me, not you. So that's my own limitations. So I just want to end with a couple of things that I just want to remind you of as we go forward from the Institute. Many of you have been through our labs, through the Harwood Catalytic Guide program. Just know that there's another round of our virtual lab happening in October, and all the things we talked about today are covered in that. The Catalytic Guide program, the next cohort's next spring. Love for you to talk to someone on our team about those things if they're helpful to you. Second, as many of you know, I'm on this sort of campaign trail doing these events in local communities. I'm happy to talk to you about potentially coming. I started by saying I'm going to see John Ferguson and other people from Indiana in Indy the first week of September. I'm happy to talk to you about coming to your community if that's supportive. Third, and really importantly, every year now, with support of the Patterson Foundation, our long-term partner, we convene funders. We have this thing called the Harwood Circle of Catalytic Funders, which is the genesis of this webinar. We're holding our third annual convening of catalytic funders in Sarasota, Florida in January. It's warm there, it's sunny there, it's friendly there. Hint, hint. January 28th and 29th, there's like a $200 registration fee. It's really to cover food. That's it. So we're trying to reduce every barrier possible. You just need to get there. A lot of you have been to it. Come yourself, bring other folks from your organization, bring your board members, bring other local funders with you. And we talk about what does it mean to be a catalytic funder and how can you do that? And so we'd love for you to join us in Sarasota, January 28th and 29th. All right, 30 seconds, 45 seconds. How are you feeling leaving this conversation? A word or a phrase?
Motivated.
Motivated? Great.
Inspired.
All right. Anyone else?
Less anxious.
All right, good. That's a good positive. Anyone else?
Appreciative of the gentle reminder of the tools that we already know, and we don't have to apply them when we're in the Harwood bubble alone, that there are other places in our lives where we can use
Yeah.
those. And that was a good reminder.
Burst the Harwood bubble. Think of this stuff as traveling everywhere in your life and work.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Listen, great to see everyone. Let us know how we can be supportive of what you're trying to do, what you're doing. Know that we're always here to support you. And yeah, let's keep going. And let's remember that we're meant to go together, right? We need each other. All right. Good to see everyone. Thanks a lot.